Hi, welcome to the TMC Newsroom. I'm Erik Linask, and I'm here with TMC President Rich Tehrani.
Hey, Erik.
How are you doing?
Doing great.
Fantastic. We've had some interesting developments in the session border controller market lately. As you're well aware, Nextone or NextPoint Networks was bought by GenBand, and that product line incorporated into the GenBand products. And then some others, Acme Packet, Sansei, Convergence are doing, actually seems like they're doing quite well. But today there's been a little different news from Newport Networks. What have you heard of that?
Well, we know that based on what we've heard from Nortel a few weeks ago, that the service provider market is softening, and there's some concern among service provider execs about spending in this environment. So there's been less capital expenditures, and subsequently we weren't really, or I wasn't that surprised to hear about Newport Networks. In fact, rumors have been floating for maybe 6 months that the company's had some challenges, and I've been meaning to blog about it. I just haven't had a chance to blog, and thankfully we've got some talented reporters on our team, and today Michael Dinan did a piece talking about what's happening with the company.
What can you tell us about what Mike uncovered?
Well, based on Dinan's report, which took place a couple of hours ago, the company reported severely reduced earnings year over year. Their earnings in the first half of this year were under $30,000, which is shockingly low compared to about $116,000 last year. So obviously that's a tremendous decrease in earnings.
Now, do you think, is that a reflection of the economy, or is that a reflection of the SBC market?
Well, yes. I mean, SBCs are not going away. They're extremely important parts of networks. They're extremely important in security for large enterprises, for call centers, for rural service providers, for all service providers. So you need SBCs. I think one of the challenges is for Newport Networks is they've fallen off the radar in the last 2-3 years. They've gone dark. I mean, I haven't heard from them in 3 years, maybe more. When a company stops talking to the media, they generally just fall off the radar. Now, Newport is an interesting animal in terms of the fact that it is a Terry Matthews company, and there's a halo around Terry Matthews companies because of Terry Matthews, and the halo that is around his head is big enough, and he's started something like 70+ successful companies. I mean, he's a legend in the technology and especially the communication space. And so utilizing Terry Matthews' charm and Rolodex and database and ability to get into carriers is a wonderful way for a company that he is invested in to go about doing business. However, what I'm predicting will happen, and I'm actually in the middle of writing an article about this. I think maybe 4 or 5 days into it. I've done a significant amount of research for what happens in downturns. Companies that are dark, that don't do PR, don't do marketing, don't do any sort of external communications, are in real trouble in a downturn. The reason is that we are in a macroeconomic environment where even the strongest of the strong companies from 5 years ago or 4 years ago are being questioned. Now let's think about it. During the IPO boom, the last IPO boom, which was, let's say, 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago, whenever that was, maybe 2000, there was a string of them, and there have been some between then and now. We as an industry looked to companies like the Merrill Lynches of the world and others to bring us public, right? Those are the kinds of companies we look to. And Goldman Sachs is another good example of a company that the telecommunications industry and virtually every industry really depended on. And to get an IPO with a Merrill Lynch and Goldman and some of these other bankers underwriting really put you in a good position. Now things have flip-flopped. The bankers that used to be unquestionably some of the best companies in the world, the strongest financially, are in deep trouble. Just yesterday, Citibank had to get backing from the U.S. government because we, as a country, lost confidence. The world lost confidence in the bank and whether it could pay its debts and continue operating as an independent concern. So when you're in an environment where reportedly AT&T has had trouble getting access to credit, albeit for a short amount of time. General Electric had access getting to credit. Previously untouchable stocks, untouchable companies have been really hit hard, and their viability has been brought into question. The smaller companies that have been relying on their technological savvy to keep afloat are going to struggle.
Well, it's true. You mentioned a few of them. Some other. Lehman Brothers also obviously was in big trouble. Bear Stearns had its problems. It seems like almost all the major investment banks are following suit.
And not just them. A lot of large companies have had. Household names have had trouble. And so, if you're a small company, and this is one of the lines that I'm taking from my blog entry that you'll be seeing soon, and that is, would you buy from you? Meaning, if you were a service provider, would you buy from a company that does not invest in communicating with your customers? And the answer is no. So a lot of small companies will be wiped out. And I saw this in 2001, and I was in the heart of it. Actually, we TMC were in the thick of it. In late 2000, we saw this booming market coming called the ASP market, application service provider, which today we call it software as a service or on demand. Same thing, apparently that term became bad, it became stigmatized, because somewhere around 2001, the venture capitalists, who of course are not the best people. In fact, they shouldn't really be running companies, but they did run companies' marketing. And the companies they invested in, they said, okay, go into the ASP market. We're going to fund you in the ASP market. But then a few months later, they said, okay, we don't want you to focus on ASP. That's a bad term. Come up with a different word for your business. Basically took a whole bunch of these companies that had great business models and screwed up the marketing that they had and their messaging and branding. And so what ended up happening was the communications ASP market went away. Now, of course, macroeconomic conditions as well. Funding did dry up across the board. A lot of these companies didn't have the funds to get through. But the point I'm trying to make is that I've seen situations where companies that are in a strong industry all get wiped out, or mostly get wiped out. Salesforce.com, Mark Benioff. We've got to call him a genius, or the luckiest man alive, or a combination thereof. Not only was he one of the hosted companies, did he run one of the hosted companies that got through the downturn, but he actually had Tom Siebel saying blatantly that his company would not make it through. And now it turned out that the company's stock ticker CRM is doing quite well, Salesforce.com, and is on its way to become a billion-dollar company, and even in this tough environment has been able to generate solid earnings. Most of the other companies that competed with Salesforce.com during that time did not understand branding and marketing, and that's why they're not here today, or messaging, or PR, or any of that. And me being an engineer, I feel comfortable insulting my fellow engineers who believe that when you develop a great product or a great service, it's going to sell itself, and it never does.
Well, I wouldn't imagine that that Newport is going to be able to follow in the Salesforce.com steps. I understand they're looking at various options, including selling the company as a whole, selling parts of the technology.
They're looking to sell the company, and apparently in an interview that CEO John Aykroyd had with Michael Dinan earlier today, they've mentioned that it's obviously a tougher time to sell a company. None of that is a bit of news to anybody who's listening to this right now. We all know that, but the one thing that every Terry Matthews company has going for it is the ability to be merged with other Terry Matthews companies, or to be packaged into other companies where Terry maybe throws some support or comes up with some creative ways to turn lemons into lemonade, let's say.
We've been talking here with TMC President Rich Tehrani, and I think, Rich, you'll agree with me that regardless of what happens with Newport, we certainly haven't heard the last of Terry Matthews.
Absolutely not. And Terry, how are you? I hope all is well, and I hope you come join us on our video show soon.
Thanks, Rich.